The next chapter is chapter 13, enrolling at Tux. Tux being Transvaal University College, the original acronym, University of Pretoria. Now that will be just on completion of my first year of national service in 1971. So in 72, no, that will be in 1973. 73 because my national service was in 1972, if I have it correct. I can't remember the exact day of our military passing out parade on completion of national service. It was around, if I'm just guessing, around the 12th of December when I returned from my national service in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. As I've covered in previous chapters, back in those days, all white South African boys had to register with the military authorities at the age of 16 and were legally compelled to do 1 year of continuous military training, followed by a regular call-ups of every 18 months to do a military camp, which could either be a 3-week or a 3-month camp, depending on the luck of the draw. The system of military service would continue until the young man reaches the age of 55. Now, young men had a choice in those days to either go to university first if they wanted to study and do their national service on completion of their university studies. And of course, then they would be applied by the military in the direction that they studied or were qualified. So the advantage of it was, that this option was that the military would then assign you to a branch that the military, to a branch of the military, so as to make use of your expertise in the direction you were qualified. That's all it entailed. Personally, I decided to do my national service first. And because at that stage I didn't have a clue what I wanted to go and study. I just didn't have a clue. So I decided I'm going to go do my national service first, and maybe down the line I would have a clearer mind as to what I intended to study, or so I thought. Now, my good friend Mace, Johan Henop, decided to go to university before doing his military service. And I don't know if it was the freedom after all these years at boarding school, and now all of a sudden he was free to do as he wishes when he wanted to do when he was at university. But he flunked his first year good and solidly. He totally flunked it. And naturally, that put the fear of God into me, because I was convinced that, well, Mace was a good scholar or student at school, very good grades. How is it possible to flunk how is it possible for him to flunk his first year? And now that worried me tremendously, because my father said to me, he says, he'll pay my studies for me as long as I pass. If I fail, I'm on my own. Then he stops paying for me. And that was what put the fear of God into me. How is it possible that a bright student at high school, like Mace, who got excellent grades in high school, failed his first year at university? That got me. Anyhow, there we were, me and Mace, the day when enrollment opened at university. And I said to Mace, what are you going to study? He says he's not sure, but he thinks he's going to study law. Let's go and study law. I said, are you out of your mind? Law. We need Latin for law. Yeah, but you had Latin at school. I says, yeah, you had Latin at school. I didn't have Latin at school. And I said, we have to have accounting for law. Yeah, but he had accounting at school. I said, well, I didn't have accounting at school. Yeah, he says, but there are special courses that you can do that you can catch up and get up to whatever standard is required. I said, well, that's nice of you. Yeah? Easy for you to say. You just flunked everything that you wanted to try now. How must I feel? Are you trying to intimidate me to go and study this? And well, they said to me, well, now we're standing in line to go and enroll. Right here, I mean, there's another 6 or 7 guys in front of us. He says, no, really, let's go and study law. I said, we got to make up our mind. There's only 5, 6 people in front of us, to register. He says, yes, no, one of your stop block subjects or stop subjects is political science, and that's easy. He's been told, it's such an easy subject, you have to apply in writing to fail. I said, okay, let's go study law. So there was Mouse and I signing up for law. Mouse was signing up for B.Proc, which is a 4-year law degree, and I signed up for B. Juris because I didn't have accounting yet, so I signed up for B. Juris, Baccalaureus Juris, which is a 3-year course. Now that enables you to practice as a magistrate, but not as an attorney. You needed a 4-year B.Proc degree, which is the equivalent of Dr. Juris in America. But there we go. We now I had to catch up with Latin. I didn't have Latin, so I had to get up to scratch with Latin within the course of 1 year of study. Now, can you imagine the funny part of it? The morning when I left home, my parents wanted to know, well, what am I going to enroll for? And I said, I don't know. And then all of a sudden that evening I came back and I told them I enrolled to study law. That expression on my dad's face, he just looked at me in disbelief. Remember what I told you? If you fail, you're on your own. And yeah, I said, yes, all right, it's okay. I'll do it. Now, here we are. We enrolled. The classes started the following day. And we had a guy who taught, what was it that he taught? Private Law 101. Professor Wichers. And we were probably about 350 students in the class. It was a large class. And he said, don't worry about the size of the class, only about 100 of you will pass to go on to your second year. Now, what a nice thing of him to say to me. I'm here in the first place, I have the fear of God of failing, and he says, yeah, only 100 of you, of the 350, probably 100 of you will pass and go on to your second year. And he said, and then the other thing that came up was, he said, you will be spending most of your time in the library. You won't have much free time as students. You'll be spending most of your time in the library reading up court cases. Now, that was the wrong thing for a guy to say, you will be doing this. After I've just completed my military service where everybody barked at me for, you will do this and you will do that. Now, all of a sudden, I will have to do this and I will have to do this. I said, to hell with this. I'm not going to do it. So I said to Mace, okay, we were both smokers at that stage. I said, you read up the court cases. And for every court case that you give me a copy of, a summary of, I'll give you a packet of cigarettes. My thought that was a hell of a deal. So he read up all the court cases, gave me a copy of a summary, and he got a packet of cigarettes for it. Which was fair enough. He scored and I scored. Now at that stage, I was dating a very good friend of my sister, a girl with the name of Ronalter Blanche. She was a year ahead of me. We were originally in the same class, but because of my military service, she was a year ahead of me, and she was staying in a private, what we called a flat apartment or whatever, which her dad had rented from the City Council of Pretoria. Being an employee of the City Council, he got it for next to nothing. And Ronel lived there. Of course, it was a very good arrangement. And Ronel was a very devoted student. And that rubbed off on me as well, because, first of all, I was nervous about this thing. I had to study and I had to pass. And so, as I say, weekdays we studied. I went over every night. I went over to her apartment and we worked and we studied and whatever. And yes, but weekends we played. Now, through Ronel, I met a guy who became a very dear friend of mine. Kees Zandvoort. His real name is Albert Zandvoort. Where he got the name Kees, it's Kees. It's a Dutch name, Kees, but you would pronounce it Kees as Case. But we all knew him as Kees, but his formal name is Albert Zandvoort. He was in his third year at the time. And goodness knows, just soon after I met him, he was in a serious motorbike accident. So much so that, they were afraid he was going to lose his leg. Not just below the knee, the whole leg. And he was in hospital, and his leg wasn't just broken, his leg was crushed. And he wasn't in a cast. It was more of something that I would call of a steel contraption around his leg, the whole of his leg, and all block and tackles and pulleys and the bloody leg up in the air and what. Shame the poor man. He had numerous surgeries done on that leg, numerous surgeries. And he was in the H.F. Verwoerd hospital. That was the main public hospital in Pretoria. And I got a call from him. No, when I visited him once, well, I can't remember exactly how it came about, but he said, yeah, I must come and get him and take him home one specific night. He wants to go home and spend the night with his wife. I said, Kees, are you out of your mind? Yeah, no, I can abduct him out of the hospital, and he's checked that there's a side door here, and I can go through there, and from this time to that time, they don't check in on them, and I come and I collect him or pick him up at that and that time, take him home, and bring him home, and bring him back to the hospital around 3:00. Nobody will know. Kees was a small guy. And of course, after all the surgeries and what, the guy didn't weigh much in a feather anyhow. So, lo and behold, I went and I picked up Kees. I carried him out of the hospital, snuck out through the side door, got to his home or his apartment. I was still carrying him, and when I knocked at his door and his wife opened, she thought she had seen a ghost. Because here I was standing holding her husband in my arms, you know. I said, then you relax, everything is okay. Kees is just a little bit horny. He wants to spend the night at home. Oh my God, what we won't do, what we didn't do. Oh my, anyhow, so that was that. Um, I left him there and I got him back, 3 o'clock. I got him back into the hospital. Kees healed well. As a matter of fact, at first he was told he would have a hard time walking again. But obviously, that doctor did not know that damn Dutchman as well as I knew him. Because Kees just didn't heal well. He healed exceptionally well. He had a little bit of a limp when he was walking, but he healed so well that he eventually ran marathons again. Not just one, but some of the most difficult marathons, like the one between Pietermaritzburg and Durban to Pietermaritzburg, which is the most crucial marathon. I think that damn thing is, it's like an 8-hour marathon. It's like 80 kilometers, 85 kilometers. He ran that numerous times. And besides that, Kees was he was very bright. As I said, when I met him, he was already a third-year student. But eventually, Kees, things may have even improved more since I've last seen him. But he came to visit me in America a couple of years ago. But then he told me that things that I had never known. In the meantime, when he was living in Europe, at one stage he was the senior vice president of Lufthansa. And he had 2 PhDs. And at the moment, or at that time, he was in private practice as he taught at Oxford, taught psychology at Oxford. He was a professor at Oxford, but he was also in private practice with his daughter in England, with his daughter Michelle. Man, bright guy. Now, as I say, years later, Kees visited me in America. Of course, I'm jumping many, many years ahead now. But this is something that I just have to get this stated and retold. During the summer of '88, Kees spent some time in what was then known as the Soviet Union as part of a group of behavioral scientists invited by the Russian Academy of Science to improve the quality of business leadership in the country. Now, on a trip with an East German riverboat from Moscow to Nizhny Novgorod, formerly known as Gorky, they stopped at the local store for some refreshments and to get a bit of exercise. Kees decided to go for a walk in the beautiful birch forest, and after about an hour came to a small and very traditional village that looked as if communism had passed it by. Now, this is his verbatim story. Walking down the dusty road, I was greeted by an elderly gentleman. Dobro jutro. Good morning. Kees had learned to speak Russian in the South African Defense Force in order to interview Russian guests and translate secret Russian documents. Guests being, of course, with the Angolan border war. As Kees sat down with him in the shade of the small wooden house, and they had exchanged pleasantries and finished about half a bottle of vodka with lots of dried fish from his loft, the old man looked at Kees oddly and said, "You really look familiar, but you were too young to have been in World War II. Let me tell you a story. It was a winter like no other winter in the war. We were hungry, supplies were running scarce, and the Germans were everywhere. So one night, I decided to go hunting for some food, knowing that I would have to stay clear of the German soldiers, especially the SS troops, as they had no mercy and took no prisoners. As I was walking through the dense forest, I stumbled onto a small clearing and saw someone merely a couple of yards away from me. He shouted, "Halt!" And the figure clad in white, not knowing if he was friend or foe, both slowly walked towards each other, rifles ready, and aimed at each other. As we walked towards each other, I suddenly realized the other person was an SS soldier and quite prepared to die. Both soldiers realized that being so close to each other, if one pulled the trigger and shot, the other would automatically do so as well. And both of them would have died right there and on the spot. But they kept on walking towards each other, both then lowering their rifles. Both stood there for a moment, and they sat down, and one of them offered the other a cigarette. And for the next hour, these mortal enemies were friends, sharing food and water, and complimenting each other on the beauty of their women and decrying the horrors and futility of this war. Finally, as if guided by some invisible hand, the men rose simultaneously, smiled at each other, shook hands, and without looking back, disappeared into the falling darkness. The old man looked at Kees expectantly. Kees continued, "Yes, his name was Zandvoort. That was my father. You met that day, many years ago. Now tell me again what a small world this is." We downed another vodka, and he said, "Yes, you sure look like him." Kees had grown up with this story, how his dad had met a Russian soldier, how they shared a cigarette and some vodka, that humanity had prevailed, that they both walked away to live another day, happy to tell the story to anyone that would listen. Kees told me that when he relayed the events to his father, years later, of him meeting with the old Russian soldier in the same area his dad had, approximately 44 years earlier. His dad stared at him in disbelief, thanked him, and looked away. As a fellow soldier, Case also noticed the memories which escaped through his dad's eyes and had rolled down his cheeks. Once a soldier, always a soldier. Now, let's go to some nicer things or funnier things. Now, remember, I was enrolled at the University of Pretoria. Our political science professor was a gentleman named Charles Nieuwoudt. The name may be familiar to some folks who read what I'm writing in this book or listen to what I'm saying here, as he was also, in those days, chairman of the South African Athletics Association back in the 70s. Now, the first year political science class was quite large. I would say about 150 students. one day I will never forget. We were supposed to write a test, and I don't know but how it came about, but Prof. Charles, as we amicably called him, he wrote the question as follows. For 25 points, write all you know about the political system of the Spartans and the Stoics. I was stumped because that was the one question that I did not spot. I did not study it. I had no cooking clue what to write about them. I knew nothing about them. So I sat there for about 10, 15 minutes, looking at other people, and other people were writing and writing and writing. And I wrote down, and I wrote on my paper, I know nothing about the Spartans and the Stoics. And I got up and I handed in my paper. It felt to me as if everybody was watching me. Probably nobody was, but I felt to me as if everybody was. I could just feel I was sinking into the ground with shame. Now wondering what's going to happen on Monday when we get back to the class again, and the papers were marked, or the tests were marked. As I feared, of course, Professor Nieuwoudt called out my name and asked me to stand. Get up, stand, let the class see you. And ladies and gentlemen, Louis van Tonder is the person who scored the highest marks in this test. As a matter of fact, he got a full score. Now imagine how I felt. I thought this guy is somehow he's gonna come for the kill within the next minute or so. But then he continued. He says, Louis answered the question in a way I could not fault him, and he scored 100%. I asked you all to write all you know about the political system of the Stoics and the Spartans, and Louis truthfully said he knew nothing about them, and I could not find fault with that, so he got full marks. Rest assured, it will not happen ever again. Of course, I did not know how to react, but of course, the whole class burst out laughing. What a gentleman he was, I mean, he could have given me a 0 or chased me out of the class or whatever, but he realized he made a mistake, and gentleman that he was, gave me credit for that. Oh, shit. And as a matter of fact, he's his daughter. I knew his daughter quite well. She went out with a guy with the name of Billy, who was an architect. But that was it. Now, in South Africa, when I was a kid, the drinking legal age to be able to consume alcohol was 18, not 21 here, 18. So, hmm? No, you don't. That's part of it. It's still university. So the legal age of drinking was 18. So we were good to go, myself and Mace, because we were already 19 at that stage. Mason out partying one night with friends, as usual, weekends. And of course, as was usually the case, we would spend the night at my house instead of his house where he just had a room. But anyhow, the following morning, my mom confronted us. And she says, "Yeah, you buggers were drunk last night." No, 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 we denied it. No, we were not. Yes, you were drinking last night. You were drunk. And of course, we protested and protested. No, no. We had a couple of beers, yeah, but we were not drunk. No, no, no. She says, "Come on now, you were drunk. If you were not drunk, how come you each had a can of husky dog food, mistaking it for some ground beef or something like that?" And as she said, "Well, you two came home last night, or shall I say early this morning, obviously drunk as you raided the kitchen and you were quite hungry. How come you both ate a can of husky dog food, mistaking it for canned beef of some sorts?" Well, checkmate. There was nothing we could say that. But of course, again, my father's face. And he didn't say a word. He just laughed. He just laughed hysterically. That's he burst out laughing uncontrollably. Now the other thing about Mouse and I, man, Saturdays we'd cruise the neighborhood, and if we see some cars at a church on Saturday morning, it's funeral. Only meant it's a funeral. So we'd follow them and whatever and go to the funeral and whatever. And afterwards, follow the cars back to whoever's house because there will be munchies and whatever and whatever. And so we would have some snacks and munchies and we would make sure we put some away for in a paper bag or whatever and make some take home, make some carry out take homes as well. And then, of course, in the afternoons, we'll cruise the streets again. If there's cars at a wedding, cars at a church, we knew that's a wedding, so we would attend that. And nobody would question. The groom would think, okay, we're friends of the bridesmaid or the bride, and vice versa. And the bride would think we're friends of the groom. Oh yeah, no, we dressed up nicely, but how somebody never challenged us. I don't know. Maybe they just were nice enough not to do it. But we always had enough food and booze over weekends. Yeah, yeah. Now, Pretoria is known as the Jacaranda City. and the jacarandas flower in October and maybe into early November. But that was also, students couldn't pay too much attention to the beauty of the jacaranda trees because that October is exam time. And there was a belief, superstition of the students that if you sit somewhere under a jacaranda tree and a jacaranda flower will fall on your head, you will pass that exam. Yeah, you'll pass the exam, blah, 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 blah. And I was sitting there next to the class one day before going to write exam, and a flower fell on my head. And then what was my thoughts? Was I gonna pass the exam? Was I superstitious enough to believe that? You betcha! Because I wrote the exam, it went pretty well. Came November, and the results came. Now remember, I worked exceptionally hard in the fear of flunking because Mace flunked his first year. I worked exceptionally hard in Latin because I had to get up to scratch in Latin. I had no idea what Latin was. All I just knew was some language people spoke a long time ago. And so I was expecting, and I saw the mailman coming one day. And of course, he knew me, the mailman, because as he saw me, he was waving a little envelope. And I knew he had it was from, he saw it, and it was from the University of Pretoria. So I went and I got the mail from him. It was as at our house in Lucasrand. Yes, and at first I was too nervous to open that envelope to read it. Eventually I decided to myself, well, come what may, I have to open it and read it. And I looked and I said, I passed all my subjects. And Latin, I got a B plus for that. Did the best of all my subject was Latin. I had the highest score for Latin. So that was it. Well, there's maybe something else I have to cover here.